What's up, guys? Paulie Malignaggi here for Paulie TV. Caleb Plant versus Jose Armando Resendiz, and Jamal Charlo versus Thomas Lammana is over. You know what? Some surprises here tonight. I mean, obviously, there's the obvious surprise in the main event, but even in the co-main event, I thought Jamal looked better than I expected. Lammana looked worse than I expected. I thought Lammana would be a bit more durable, especially against the Jamal Charlo that was off for a while and had been rather inconsistent. Let's break them down. First I'll go with the co-main event and Charlo versus Lammana. Going into the fight, obviously the talk was Charlo to win the fight, Caleb Plant to win the fight, and then they would fight each other, right? I mean, that was the expected results. That was they kind of put them in with opponents that you would expect them on paper to beat. They were heavy favorites against both guys. And, the opponents were respectable, but not guys that you would really pick to fight this level of opposition at this point in the careers of Plant and Charlo. I personally thought that you could have that fight didn't need a build up. I thought it was late as it was. I thought you could have just went right into Plant versus Charlo. Be as it may, the results tonight prove that they just kind of ruined it by making their two useless tune-up fights for no reason, and then Caleb Plant winds up getting beat. But let's break it down the action with Charlo and Lammana. Lammana is typically like your typical one-look guy. He's got a decent jab, pretty decent fighter all around. Doesn't do anything spectacular, but is pretty solid overall. And decently durable. I mean, I know he got stopped by Erislandy Lara, but Thomas Lammana is a durable guy. He's a pro. He's not world class, but he's a pro, and he knows his way around the ring. He's his father and him are regional promoters in Jersey, so he gets a lot of his fights there. He'll build up some wins on his shows, and then he'll get an opportunity. And typically he'll lose a big opportunity. I don't think he's won a big fight, even though he's gotten a couple of opportunities. There's the Lara fight. There's the Charlo fight. Even when Antoine Douglas was at one time a good prospect before they ruined him when they put him in with Kurtzidze. He fought Antoine Douglas on Showbox when Antoine Douglas was shrieking, and Douglas beat him as well. And Lammana got stopped in those fights. But again, overall, he's a decently solid, durable guy. He's high guard. The problem is that he's basic on offense, and he doesn't have a lot of power. But speaking as someone who didn't have a lot of power in his career, didn't get a lot of stoppages, I think I can give the opinion here that I think what's necessary, especially if you're going to succeed at world-class level, or you're going to at least give these world-class fighters trouble in the very least, is, yes, you do need a jab, which Lammana has, but you need a varied jab first and foremost. You need a jab that's going to, be off rhythm. It's going to offset the rhythm of the world-class fighter, the world-class opponent. You're going to work it off the feints. You're going to work it off different looks, and you're going to work it off different level changes as well. And Lammana, as a guy who doesn't have a lot of power, also gives you pretty much one look. He'll have the high guard, or he'll have the left hand low, but he doesn't change levels, doesn't feint a lot, or at least if he's feinting, he's not feinting and punching. Some guys just feint and they don't punch with the feint. So sometimes you got to feint and punch, sometimes you got to feint and not punch, and sometimes you just got to punch and not without the feint. So you vary that attack overall, and then you got to change the rhythm of your jab as well. Sometimes it's a little faster, sometimes it's a little harder, sometimes it's just like a rubber band, sometimes you double it, sometimes you throw it a high, sometimes a low, whatever. If you're going to be the fighter that doesn't get a lot of stoppages, and you don't have big power, you've got to have this kind of variation to your lead hand. And you got to also blade your shoulders off a little bit at times, so you can throw more of a power jab. Sometimes you're a little bit more square if you want to come back with some right hands and hooks. You got to pick your moments, of course, to come back with those right hands and hooks, because if you come back at the wrong moment, you're going to get yourself popped. Again, Lammana has none of this. So what happens? Once Charlo starts pressing him, and Charlo, once he gets warmed up, does have a good jab, and he has a heavy jab. He always had a pretty good jab. He always had the Charlos themselves always had that jab, that double jab right hand combination was really, really sharp. And it was, when they were on and they were at their best, that was one of my favorite combinations to watch them throw. But Jamal still, even at an older age, and still, when he's not at his best and off of a long layoff, once he gets the jab rolling, it's still a heavy punch. And Jamal has a heavy jab, and he also can vary it better. He can give it from those different looks, and he can shoot it at different speeds and so on and so forth. So Lammana ends up jabbing in his regular basic jab, and what happens? Eventually, Charlo's backing him up, Now Lammana's on the back foot. He's sort of in flight on the back foot, and all he's doing is jabbing. But again, when all you're doing is jabbing is one thing. All you're doing is jabbing in the same rhythm all the time. It's even worse, and that's what ends up happening. Charlo just basically ends up coming forward without anything to worry about. That's another thing you got to have if you're going to be a guy with not a lot of power. You got to have a good jab. You got to have all the rhythmic jabs that I just talked about. But plus, you also got to be a good counterpuncher. Was when a guy's walking you down and he throws his power. If you don't have to hit him hard, but if you hit him with sharp counters, he's going to kind of freeze and be like, okay, I can't just walk straight because I'm going to walk into stuff here and it's going to shock me, So you give the guy something to think about, and what does that happen? What happens when you give the guy something to think about? He slows down his pressure because he's got to think before he attacks you. And that slows the pace down a little bit. And then you can go back off that jab with a slower pace, and you can maybe work off your jab a lot better. Either way, you build to these things is what I'm talking about, guys. And Lammana did none of these things. So Charlo was able to basically walk him down and use him basically as a sparring partner tonight. As a matter of fact, I thought Charlo probably could have got the fight stopped even earlier. But there were moments where you could kind of tell, and I'm sure you guys will agree with me, where he was stepping up to Lammana and then he was kind of stepping back because he wanted to maybe get another round or two of work and whatnot. Dropped Lammana a few times, had him hurt, had him outclassed. Lammana brave, was talking trash, didn't want the fight stopped, so on and so forth. Obviously, he's a veteran of a lot of fights, so he knows how to stay in there and deal with punishment if he has to. But ultimately, Charlo got the job done, and Charlo got the job done in a more impressive fashion, because I thought a rusty Charlo would probably go the distance in this fight. I thought he would win it. I didn't think Lammana was really a threat to him, but I thought a bit of a rusty Charlo will go the distance in this fight. And whatever it is, even if Lammana is so limited, I still got to give Charlo credit for getting the stoppage in the fight. Regardless if, there's a lot of things he could probably do better, and against better opposition, who knows what he's going to do. Here's the thing. The better opposition was going to be Caleb Plant. It's not going to be Caleb Plant now, because Caleb Plant had a surprising and shocking loss tonight to Jose Armando Resendiz. Now, here's the problem when you get to Caleb Plant's level, and if you get to the successful level in general, you get a little bit older, you start to advance in age, you made a lot of money, you're successful, you have a family at home, you're kind of happy, you're settled. And so the fire and the killer instinct inside you, even though, you're a man and you feel like you have it, when it comes down to put it in the ring against another fighter who may be hungry, a guy like Jose Armando Resendiz, who comes from Mexico, and those Mexican fighters are always hungry, especially when they're getting these kind of opportunities, they are going to fight their balls off. And that's what Jose Armando Resendiz did. So with Caleb Plant, you get to an age, and I've been there too, where you get to an age where you got enough skills where you feel like your skills are better than most guys you're going to fight, unless they're world-class guys, okay? So most sub-world-class guys, you feel like you can outskill them even if they're going to be hungrier than you. So Resendiz was expected to be that guy. Yeah, he's not as skilled as Plant, but he's hungry because he just be heard, so he's going to come with that pressure. But you think, okay, your skills are going to offset a guy like this. The thing is, when you're older, you end up usually fighting a bit more to not lose than you do to win. I mean, there are older guys who do magnificent things, don't get me wrong, but what I'm saying, when you start seeing a great fighter, or a really good fighter, or a world-class fighter getting older, you start to watch his patterns as he gets older. You watch him fight, and he's still fighting very well, he's still fighting with skill, but now he's not fighting as ferociously anymore. He's fighting more so to not lose, by basically skilling you, and by his skills, he'll get the opponent to leave him alone just enough to outclass him and win a decision and move on to the next big match, and sort of hover around world-class level for other paydays. I think that's what Plant was trying to do, obviously, tonight. The intent was to beat Resendiz and get the Jamal Charlo fight. The thing is, you end up doing that, and you end up probably, when you end up fighting like that, what you do is you end up hitting guys just enough to keep them off you. But you're not really looking to get in a tough fight anymore, because you're older and you've been in many tough fights. Typically, by this point in your career, you've been world class, and you've been through the tough fights that are world class. And Caleb Plant surely has been through those tough fights. The Benavidez and Canelo fights obviously were tough, and he hung tough in those fights. He beat Uzcategui in a world championship winning effort, where it was not an easy fight to win against Uzcategui as well. So. Even his last fight against Macumbi, he had to roar back after going down. So, Plant has been in his share of rough and rugged fights, and he's been a world-class fighter. So you end up in this fight with Resendiz. What's on the other side of it is a payday against Charlo, and it's going to be built up, and it's been built up, and you're going to make a lot of money. So you're just trying to get there. You want to beat this guy and hope that he leaves you alone just enough. Be world class enough just to have him leave you alone. Resendiz wasn't cooperating, and that's the thing. Now you got to fight these guys. Now all of a sudden you hit them and you pop them with your sharp little shots that usually will impress a sub world class guy. But all of a sudden you got a guy who's so hungry. Yeah, he's going to get pop with your shots. He's not going to lose his position. He's going to hold his position position and keep coming forward. Hold this position and not go backwards, not freeze. Keep coming forward, keep making it physical. Then all of a sudden, you wind up in a tougher fight than you wanted to be in this point in your career, especially in a fight where you were expected to win to get to the other side of it to get a bigger payday. Now all of a sudden you're in this tough fight, and mentally it's just not there. And that's what I feel like I saw in Caleb Plant tonight. There skills were there. There was moments of little sharp shots and world-class level stuff, but he wasn't consistent with it. He wasn't following up with it. This is not the Caleb Plant that beat Jose Uzcategui, where he was hungry with his shots, sharp, following up, making sure he's completing the job. Now you're the guy who's supposed to win. You're supposed to beat this guy. Nobody knows this guy. You just want him to sort of respect you, just be in awe of you. But Resendiz was not in awe tonight. He kept bringing pressure. He kept coming forward. Like I said, he kept not busting position. The knockdown in round round 6, I think it was, when Plant went down. Abner Mares, I thought, made a really good point during the fight where Plant has to put the punches in bunches. He had to put the punches in combinations. Yes, he was landing the sharp shot, the occasional sharp shot here, there. It looked good, but it wasn't enough to get Resendiz's respect. Resendiz was there to fight. He was hungry tonight. So you got to put more numbers on him. And at this point, Caleb Plant isn't the guy who's going to put those kind of numbers on you, And he was just looking to sharpshoot and get through the fight. Resendiz wasn't going to let you sharpshoot and get through the fight. In the knockdown in the 6th round, that really, for me, really altered the momentum of the fight drastically with a big knockdown, was a big right hand by Resendiz. Abner Mares in the fight, actually, in the commentating, said that it reminded him of the right hand that Canelo landed against Plant. But this was actually a punch where Caleb Plant took the shot. He took the right hand. It was a similar right hand, but Caleb Plant was looking to throw an uppercut. If you look at this shot, when Resendiz lands the right hand, the reason Plant is hurt is because Plant was looking to throw his own right hand uppercut, and he's got his left hand down. And Plant is looking to throw a right hand uppercut, and what happens with his left hand down, he's throwing a right hand uppercut. He's turning his body for the right hand uppercut, and he gets hit with the right hand coming from that side, and that hurts him. It's a shot he doesn't see. He also kind of walks into it because he's looking to step in with the uppercut, and that hurt him. And that sort of gave Resendiz even more confidence, and it built up to that. As the fight wore on, you saw this. The Resendiz was hungrier. Caleb Plant didn't really have the fight in him, because now all of a sudden you got to do what you did in the McCumbee fight all over again. You got to have the fight inside you, and there's only so many times you're going to summon that out of you in your career, especially as it gets later in your career, especially also that you've been comfortable, you've made good money, you've got a family you want to go home to, and you're settled well. It's much tougher to bring that dog out of you, especially consistently at that age with all those other variables that I just mentioned. So Resendiz gets the win, guys. Resendiz now 2 big wins in his career. Beat an older Jarrett Hurd, and beat an older Caleb Plant. But in this one, Caleb Plant on paper wasn't as shot as Jarrett Hurd was when Resendiz beat Hurd. So now all of a sudden, you don't have Charlo and Caleb Plant now, but do you have Charlo and Resendiz? It's a good fight. I don't know if it's a pay-per-view fight. I don't know at this point what PBC is willing to do with their pay-per-views, but I don't think Charlo and Resendiz is a pay-per-view, obviously, but I think it's a fight to make. And I think now all of a sudden the rebranding of Jamal Charlo, if you consistently bring him back, I think the Resendiz fight is actually, because I thought they were just going to waste everybody's time going in here. I thought Charlo had nothing left and Plant had a little bit more left. And I thought, you're just going to recycle Charlo just so you can make a big fight with Charlo and Plant. But now you can actually use Resendiz as a guy who you continue to use as the opponent for Charlo's remaking, so to speak, Charlo's resurgence, so to speak. Charlo has now beaten Jose Benavidez. He's beaten Thomas Lammana. You put him in against Resendiz, it keeps stepping up the ladder. If he beats Resendiz, who's now come on a roll himself, now you put him in a big fight. I don't know what big fight there is at this point at 168, because the names and faces are changing. But nonetheless, he beats Resendiz, you put him in a big fight. Or if Resendiz beats him, dude, you got a lot of options, because Resendiz is a Mexican fighter who's fun to watch. The fans are going crazy for him. Now all of a sudden you can put him in with anybody. You can put him in with Diego Pacheco. You can put him in with Lester Martinez. You can put him in with even the Edgar Belangas of the world and whatnot, or Hamza Shirazes of the world, whatever, If you got, if Resendiz beats Charlo. But if Charlo beats Resendiz, it's the same thing. I mean, his name recognition will carry into all those fights as well. So I do think that there's options to make the Charlo Resendiz fight at this point. I mean, I don't know what Caleb Plant does. He didn't look hungry to me, but he obviously still has all his faculties. You know, if he's not hungry anymore, he's got to assess that himself. He didn't look hungry to me tonight, but of course that's something that every fighter has to personally speak to themselves about in private, and have sort of that inner discussion with themselves if it's worth it to continue, how they are doing financially, if they want to risk themselves with having a beautiful family at home like Caleb Plant does. So all these things, you know, you got to sort of have that conversation with yourself. But what do you guys think at home, man? Do we make Charlo Resendiz? And who wins Charlo Resendiz? Because, you know, we still don't know how much Charlo has left. You know, it's the resurgence continues, and I think personally now Resendiz is a good logical step. It's not a super fight that wouldn't have been sold to you as a super fight like Charlo and Plant was, but I didn't think Charlo and Plant was going to be a super fight anyway, you know. But this fight makes sense in the sort of the steps to bring back Jamal Charlo. If he beats Resendiz, it's actually a good win now, because Resendiz coming off the wins over Caleb Plant. He also has a win over Hurd. He's got a pretty nice, decent resume for Charlo to get a win over a guy like that. But if Resendiz beats Charlo, he adds to his resume. Either way, the winner can be set up nicely in the 168-pound division. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Let me know your thoughts on tonight's fights. Let me know what you guys think. The future for all these guys. I'm Paulie Malignaggi. This is Paulie TV.